But I just want to stay focused on this raid and the rescue of the hostages. So another thing that angers me is we even have a lot of people on the right with whom we have, there's cleavages now and disunity because a lot of people that were once on our side have turned against Israel. But there's these arguments even by them, not just the leftists, but not just by the jihadists, but even by people on our side now, that this is so disproportionate. The Israelis went into to rescue their hostages, but too many people were killed in the process. I don't know what other nation is held up to this standard, but I often wonder, what if your children were kidnapped and were being sexually assaulted and raped in tunnels? How many casualties would be okay in order to rescue them, and how many casualties would be too many and you would be opposed to the rescue of your own children? But Israel is really held up to a moral standard that no other nation is held up to. But what do you think about this disgusting judgment against Israel, that when it's trying to rescue its hostages, Israel is blamed that maybe too many people died in the process?
Yeah, I can tell you that even if nobody had died in the process, then
Mm-hmm.
it would be still criticized for using excessive force or something of that kind. The fact is that most, if not all, of the civilians who were killed, and we don't know how many there were. Hamas is the only source, once again, for how many were killed, and they kept raising it in the 24 hours after the hostage rescue, and revising it up with a speed that strains credulity of itself, because how would they have had time to go through and meticulously catalog everything that had happened and count all the bodies and so on? Um, this was fishy in itself, but Hamas has been caught lying several times about the casualty figures. Of course, they have every reason to inflate them for propaganda purposes. But anyway, however many were killed, most or all of them were actively engaged in keeping the hostages. The quintessential example is, I believe his name was Abdallah al-Jamal, who was a reporter for the Palestine Chronicle, who also had done some work for Al Jazeera. And he was killed. And there were a lot of sources that were saying, look, see, they killed this journalist during their raid, this civilian journalist. Well, as a matter of fact, he was holding 3 of the hostages in his house. So he was a civilian, yes, but he was certainly actively working with Hamas and engaged in this crime of holding these hostages. So, well, you play these games, then they're going to be consequences. And so the fact is, I think that the reaction in general to the raid, to the rescue of the hostages, and the exaggerated crocodile tears and concern for the civilians who were allegedly killed during the raid, it all just comes down to a hatred for Israel, as well as most likely a hatred for Jews themselves.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
remember the conservative commentator Elijah Schaffer on Twitter. And right after, I think it might have been the night of October 7th. If it wasn't the night of October 7th, it was October 8th, but it was very early on. And he wrote on Twitter, I'm sure you can still find it there, what Hamas did was wrong, and what Israel is doing now in Gaza is wrong. Well, Israel wasn't doing a thing in Gaza at that time. They hadn't started any response. But Elijah Schaffer, and of course many others, were ready to condemn Israel no matter what it did. And the fact is, as West Point's John Spencer, who's no relation, and Richard Kemp of the British military, they are both military experts who have studied the IDF's behavior in Gaza, and both come separately to the conclusion that the IDF is scrupulously careful, more than any other military, more than the US military, to avoid civilian casualties. and Israel is still demonized in this way, it's very clear that it's not really about concern for the civilian casualties. It's really all about demonizing the state of Israel.